Road Rash 3D, released in 1998, would be the second entry on the PlayStation, but would also be the first in the series to utilise a full array of 3D graphics and environments that moved away from the visuals of the earlier games in the series, but still kept with all of the unique features and arcade style elements that made the Road Rash series so popular. The game, like its predecessor, also featured licensed music from iconic bands that presented among some of the best soundtracks ever in video games for its time. The game received decent reviews across the board and stated that they liked the fact that it moved into 3D, but where the game did fail in regards to reviews was the lack of multiplayer or two-player support. But this would be rectified in later sequels, even with the likes of a year later, Road Rash 64 was released on the Nintendo 64, and many thought of it to be a simple port of Road Rash 3D for that console, but essentially it was a ground up rehaul of the overall game, reworking many of the major elements to improve on some of the features in the PlayStation version, but also managed to add in multiplayer modes to support even up to 4 players. That wasn't possible on the PlayStation version. You would also see multiplayer elements being the main focus of the later sequel, Road Rash Jailbreak, that would also see release on the PlayStation, that primarily focused mainly on multiplayer aspects, especially with a 2-player cooperative mode, allowing motorcyclists to attach a sidecar so that the second player can play as an additional accomplice to race and also fight and use combat mechanics against opponents, utilising weapons and fists and kicks and so forth. That was always the element with the Road Rash series. The mix is fast paced racing with combat elements where you could punch, kick, knock drivers off their bikes while also stealing weapons from your opponents that you can use to deal a lot more damage as you played, while you also had to deal with many police officers that would always try to take you down. So with that, and with the whole emphasis really on the Road Rash games, was always to increase your status within the ranks of the races that you were in, so you would have to keep winning races with the idea to upgrade and buy better bikes. But at any point throughout the campaign or championship, if you damaged your bike fully or you were caught by the cops, you would literally lose all your money and you'd have to start the process over again. So there was a lot of ideas at play. It wasn't just about winning races, there were so many things that could go wrong as well. So you definitely had to have your wits about you. But with it being a 3D racer and being the first in the Road Rash series to be fully utilised in 3D, again the game isn't without its flaws. It does have some discrepancies in terms of how it controls and how it feels, especially when you compare it to original games in the series that had, especially with the first Road Rash game that was released in 1995, that had 3D elements with the environments but used 2D sprites as the characters. So the controls were a bit more approachable in the earlier games, but with this version it took a bit more getting used to, so it would take time to adapt to all of the unique elements that the game had on offer. Even from my own personal experience, the very first time I ever played Road Rash 3D was round at a friend's house, and I didn't even know that he had it until I called round. And when I got to play it, I thought it was really cool getting to play Road Rash but in a whole different style, and I will admit I was terrible at it. I couldn't win a race at all. I kept crashing and falling off the bike. It was just, it played and felt very, very different from the Road Rash that I knew and loved in years previous to it. And even going back to playing it now years later, it's still a very fun game, but it is tough. I'm not going to deny that for a second. But it does have enough appeal, and the fact is that it is a purebred arcade racer with no emphasis on realism whatsoever. It's just fun, it's gritty, it doesn't take itself seriously at all. And if you want something that will provide many hours of fun and just have a good laugh, just destroying everything or falling off your bike or taking out opponents, you will have a good laugh with this. Plus you also have an excellent soundtrack on offer that will help to increase and make the experience more entertaining as a result. It just is a fun, solid game all round, and it's a worthwhile addition to any game collector's catalogue for sure. So if you're a fan of Road Rash, you definitely have to try this game out for sure. The tracks are long, they're open-ended, and what moves away from this compared to the previous versions is the fact is that it uses more of an open world style environment, as all of the tracks can all intertwine at different points, so you can take different routes. Now in some cases, even during races, you can completely go off track and you can lose sight of the race in general, so you can explore everything within the environment, which is that's something you want to do, you can do that as well. As long as you don't get busted by the cops, you're fine. So that adds a whole different appeal to it that wasn't seen in earlier Road Rash games, which makes it even more fun to explore and enjoy. But if you want to focus on racing, you can do that as well. But you'll find that with later races, you'll find that you will notice certain areas and junctions that you have been in and raced on in the past, but you'll maybe have to go a different direction the second time round that you play it. So that adds to the whole diversity of the gameplay, making it more fun for those looking for a different approach to their play styles. It just is a very fun game all round. It has a lot to offer, a lot of replay value, and it just is a good, fun, solid game. And it is worthwhile going back to enjoy it all over again, and I highly recommend that you do if you're a fan of this iconic series. But I would love to know your thoughts of Road Rash 3D for the PlayStation, and what do you think of it overall? Do you prefer this newer version of the Road Rash idea of it going fully 3D, or do you still prefer the iconic elements seen in earlier Road Rash games that would have been seen on the early days of the PlayStation and even earlier with the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive? So be sure to share it down in the comments below. And if you would like to see more videos on the channel around other types of motorbike racers also released on the system, you can check out the playlist here on screen, and I'll leave a link in the description so that you can go and check out those games and see them in action. If you have enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, and as always, keep those gaming memories alive.